Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard with Bill Stierle, your host. And Bill, I am energized. I am ready to talk about, we left off last time talking about the straw man, and then moved into confirmation bias. And that's a subject that deserves a little more attention. So I thought we would take a deeper dive into that today.
Well, Tom, I feel delighted to talk today because it's the impact of language and word choice. Those language and word choices that come in our direction that reinforce messages that we already have, instead of allowing us to explore or move into beliefs and experiences that we, haven't had, is really a significant discussion to have about how, if you don't know something, it's easier to confirm what you already know to be true, even though it might be false, rather than to say, well, wait a minute. I used to think of black holes around the solar systems and around this way, but now scientists tells us it's different than what I learned. Woo, boy, I almost feel uncomfortable. Breaking the bad news to people is that information and knowledge keeps shifting and changing. And in this fast-paced world, it's a little hard to have stability and certainty about things that we learned in our high school, things we learned, in our early adult lives to be true, or whether it was through work experience or through college or through a workplace that taught us some things. We're constantly staying in our belief structure that's familiar, rather than saying, tell me a little bit more about that thing that you're saying. Let me see if I could change or adjust to what you're saying. But that's not what we do. We do a comparison piece. I'm holding one hand up here, my left hand up, and now my right hand is, here's information I have, and I'm comparing it to the new information you're giving me, and I'm choosing what's right. So confirmation bias is that I am going to confirm what I already know. I am not necessarily going to include the truth that you're telling me.
I think you used a very good word in there, Bill. You said uncomfortable, that
Yes.
People get uncomfortable. And isn't it human nature that a lot of people really don't like change? They want things to be consistent and stable and predictable.
Yes.
So
yes.
Opening yourself up, opening your mind up to new possibilities, new things that might change your beliefs, it's a hard thing to do for people, isn't it?
It's a very, very hard thing to do with people, and it causes all kinds of disruptions on a lot of different levels. See, if a human being has a lot of stability, has a lot of comfort in their world, that there's like kind of a lot of their needs are being met, they don't have to focus so much about the outside battle. The battle becomes an inside battle. The more comfortable you are with your outside world, the more you need to be self-reflective, because you're not fighting the outside world. But well, the fight's got to come somewhere, so you got to point it back to your inside world. So I'd rather have safety in what my beliefs are and stick with those, even though I formulated them when I was a 15-year-old or when I was an 18-year-old or when I was a 21-year-old, because this is the way this first boss treated me. Therefore, all bosses treat me the same way.
That's a great. I'm glad you used that example, because it just triggered a memory in my mind. And I remember, for
It's everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere. Confirmation bias is everywhere. Go ahead. Tell me what it triggered. And we'll have a lot of fun with this. I can tell.
Yeah, this is good. So I remember, growing up. I mean, I was raised. My parents are divorced, and I was raised a lot by my grandparents. Not that my parents weren't there, but I mean, the stability figures in my life of, marriage for life and stability of family came from both sets of my grandparents, not my parents, right?
Yeah, from your parents. Wow, great. Okay, great capture. Mm-hmm.
And so
your experience with your grandparents, your experience with your parents has confirmed some things about relationships and the way relationships work and they don't work. So
right. Well, so where I was going with that, and this isn't meant to be a thing about relationships, wasn't my point. Although I've been married.
The system is still the same.
I've been married for 27 years, so I don't know for what that's worth. I think my grandparents were my role model, and that, I don't know.
Right. There you got it.
Anyway, again, my point in bringing it up was not necessarily to be about relationships. It was about employment. You mentioned jobs, and that was my issue.
And the boss,
right. So my grandparents, like my grandfather, for instance, worked his entire life as a civil engineer, had full-time employment the whole time, and was of one of those generations where he worked for the whole company practically his entire career.
Whole career, whole life, right there.
Had a pension from that company, all that. Well, and so I was raised with this belief early on that that's what you do. You get a job, you're loyal to the company, they're loyal to you, you stay with them forever. And then talk about a bubble that bursts very quickly getting out of college, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I came to learn, whether I wanted to, open my mind up to it or not, it was sort of forced upon me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember then talking to my same grandfather about this at one point when I'm talking about a big career change decision very early in my career. And he said, well, that's what I would call an agonizing reappraisal was the word that he used. An agonizing reappraisal of your life, reassessment, making change. It's not an easy thing, right? And so,
oh my gosh, the word appraisal for all those people in the housing world, an appraisal, to get an appraisal done on your house, to have an appraisal or done on your car accident, painful.
Oh,
it's something you just don't want to do because it is what it is, even though it's a subjective opinion from the appraiser.
Yes.
It has some subjectivity to it, and you don't want the bad word to come in, because the appraiser comes in for your house and they say, well, it's really appraised at this number. And you're going like, that's $50,000 less than I thought I was going to get out of this house, or $100,000 less, or whatever. Now, can it be pleasant? Sometimes, but most of the time it's not. It's a disappointment because it's lower than what we think.
Yes, and I think the fear of disappointment and the uncertainty of change makes people very uncomfortable. And I came to learn early on in career-wise, because actually for the majority of my career since I was starting out, I've been independent. Have my own company or another, or somehow independent consultant.
Exactly.
Because I came to realize early on that employment in America today, anyway, there is no loyalty there. People get laid off left and right. It's, there is no real job security in having a full-time job with a corporation. I came to believe, and this is the phrase, that everyone's temporary. Everyone at every job is temporary, whether you want to see it or not, or whether you believe it or not. I personally believe everyone's temporary. Every job is temporary. You're not going to be in a job for your whole life. So anyway, that interesting, experience that you triggered in my mind.
Yeah. So just put a pause in that, because what you just did was kind of put about 3 different learning diamonds in front of all of us. And the first learning diamond is that there was a belief, even a confirmed bias, around companies supporting their employees for a lifetime. So coming out of the 40s, out of the World War II, into the 50s, a lot of stability with work, a lot of stability with housing, a lot of stability with education and learning, a lot of kind of suffering a lot of different families had to go through with the losses of World War II. We come into the 50s economy. We start with a bias that this is what an American family looks like. The wife's at home. The dad goes to work. She's taking care of 2 kids. That was a stark difference from the 1940s woman who went to work in the war machine in the factories making the munitions. Now all of a sudden the new image is sold that she's at home taking care of a kid. Wait a minute, my identity just shifted. So now my belief bias has just moved into a direction. Oh, right. Now that, men are back from the war, they've got to take over the factory jobs. And they've got to be the sole provider. And I got to take care of the kids. And the more kids, the better. And, 2 kids at least, more kids, the better. Build these cul-de-sacs with communities of kids running down the street and riding their bikes and playing at the park. And voila, you've got the late 50s and you got the early 60s. Then all of a sudden it's the bias changes. The beliefs changes. Wait a minute. What is all this constriction and monochromatic work life? There's a lot more freedom here. There's a lot more creativity here. Even though, so the 60s was able to build its movement. Civil rights, all of that was able to be built on a stable economy and a stable home life.
Now that's very interesting to think about.
Because once a person's child, a person is in a place of stability, they get to actually start, their creative mind starts to work. They start looking at the congruency between the outside world and the inside world. Meanwhile, right there at the end of that time period, Eisenhower goes, hey, you may want to watch about the military-industrial complex. And now all of a sudden we're in Korea, we're in Vietnam, we're in the next war with the next country. And we just need somebody to focus outside, and then so that we're not looking at inside values and inside beliefs around justice or fairness or equality or equanimity or choice. We've got this outside battle we have to deal with. So our stability has been compromised on multiple levels. Even though we crave stability, our stability is kind of compromised right now, which makes it easier to hijack a person's belief. It's easier because they're not thinking inside, what do I believe and what do I want to stand for? They're thinking, we're going to trust this leader outside us, and he's going to take us home because he's like us.
Wow. Well, that really makes me have a lot more respect for someone in politics, like, let's say, Justin Amash, congressman from Michigan, who's willing to stand up and speak against his own party, potentially against his own future in Congress, and certainly putting himself in a riskier place there.
Yeah.
And say, you know what? I've read all 400 and whatever pages of the Mueller report. I have directed my team to review it. We've all given it serious reflection and compared it to the law. And guess what, folks? President Trump committed obstruction of justice, and he should be impeached. I mean, this guy is not running for president, so he's not doing this to try to compete in a presidential election against Trump. He's doing it because he seems very sincere in his beliefs.
Yeah.
And he's confident that, hey guys, the law is the law and the president's not above the law, and we need to hold him accountable.
So they immediately tried to make him an outlier. That's the first thing they did. They tried to make him. He's never really voted behind. He's always given Trump pushback. And the answer is, yeah. Like, he's been on the right side of this one. Yeah, he's supposed to be giving Trump pushback. Why? Because he sees the fallacy and the confirmation bias that Trump is selling or pushing or promoting. See, Trump's bias is that he's a great leader. His bias is that wealth that he has accumulated, been able to manage, been able to adjust, been able to spend, been able to lose, is the weight that I would like people to see. I would like people to see that wealth equals. I want people to see that wealth equals respect. Wealth equals recognition. Wealthy, you're on the self-worth side. You're voting for the smartest person in the room. You know what? I'm a stable genius.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's confirming the fallacy. So, and I know that we talked about this at the straw man last time, but it's worth mentioning again is that when he says the sentence, most people don't know that Lincoln was a Republican, the person hears that and says to themselves, I knew that. I'm smarter than most people. Notice that's a fallacy. It doesn't mean you're smarter than most people. It just means that.
Well, because he said most people don't know it, and you know it, therefore I must be smarter than most people.
Right. My self-worth is getting confirmed that I'm a smarter than most people. Who am I going to vote for? The person that just called me smarter than most people?
Probably.
Yeah, I'm voting for that guy. He just called me smart. My vote is a smart vote.
Wow.
This type of adjustment of a person's perception, broadening their perspective to the fallacy of information and arguments that confirm their currently held belief that they've been screwed. See, you can't fight against technology. Watch this one. Americans right now are producing way more than we did 30, 40 years ago. We're producing it with a third of the workforce. The biases and the bias belief that's being sold is immigrants have taken those jobs. But that's not what the truth is. The truth is that Robots and mechanization has taken the jobs, 2/3 of the jobs. You've been eliminated by a piece of machinery. Uh-oh. How do you make a case to get a person's vote when a piece of machinery got their job? Not an immigrant. Well, I'll blame it on the immigrant.
So you perpetuate this belief that it is, in fact, the immigrants that are stealing the jobs rather than the technology, the robotics, the mechanization, the software, the AI that keeps being developed.
You will continue to lose your jobs unless you make technology upgrades inside your brain. You've got to start matching technology until you choose not to. Like my dad said at 85, he says, Bill, I'm not gonna learn any more on the computer now. I think I'm just gonna live my days this way. I looked at him and go like, oh my gosh, he just made a conscious choice not to spend his last 5 years learning anything. And you know what? Good idea. It's like, it's not, if that's your choice, you know, and it's overwhelming you and frustrating you, wake up, have breakfast, go sit out on the porch with your wife, you know, go to a walk to the beach with her, you know, do those things.
If that's what makes you happy, absolutely.
If that's what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody does that in their 40s, I'm not going to learn any more about technology. There's a few consequences that are coming their way unless they're sitting on a pile of dough.
Well, and if I can pivot the conversation slightly, what are become the consequences of people that are under a severely biased belief? For instance, for example, let's take again because it's a good example and it's fairly recent. The town hall Justin Amash had in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where this, you know, the media afterwards is speaking to certain audience members, and you know, he's speaking to his conservative Republican constituents here in this town hall, and he's telling them the truth about the Mueller report. And what it means is none of them, I'm sure, in the audience had read the whole thing. They'd only heard what they'd been told. And this woman says, well, I watch conservative news. I had no idea there was anything negative about the president in the Mueller report. And she was like awestruck.
Totally awestruck because the illusion, the curtain has been pulled away. She sees that something has taken place. Here's her representative telling her, hey, these things. Now, where the mistake has been made by, here it comes, the entire group, by Biden, by Warner, by Kamala Harris, by, you know, Buttigieg, all the different, the thing that they're making a mistake is that they're making it an all or none narrative. And that's in Trump's favor. All of these things are a witch hunt. He's owning that space. My request would be, from a languaging perspective, is you take the worst one of those 10 obstruction pieces and you amplify it all together. You amplify one of them. Which one? The worst one. You amplify the worst one.
You make the nitty-gritty about it known, the context, the where, the when, who was involved.
That's right. You go after the specifics. Let them get on defense a little bit, because the offense is all or none right now. It's all of this, all of these 10 things. That's enough to impeach. No, that's not what you need. You need one thing. One thing. You need one thing to impeach.
Wow.
So if I asked Bernie Sanders, I said, Bernie Sanders, would you be willing to amplify that the first half of the report, part 1, that the Russians did meddle in the election. Amplify that.
Sure. Well, and isn't that something you said in a past episode, is that the candidate that actually latches on to, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually solve that problem of Russia meddling in our elections, where, of course, Trump's running as far away from that one as he can.
Correct. And actually point out that he is running away from it. Right. And Bernie or whatever candidate wants to pick this up, Cory Booker could easily pick this one up and say, listen, he needs to be impeached because here's what happened at the first part of the report, and he is not doing his job to protect Americans in the future. And there has been no efforts by this administration to keep it from happening again. In fact, there have been preventative efforts from it. They've made it easier for them to meddle. They made it easier by their non-action.
Wow.
They're not looking into the loophole.
All right. All you campaign strategists out there who are getting into this episode, you need to pay attention to this right here. I think you're completely right, Bill.
So, proof by selected incidences is where a confirmation bias gets engaged. Proof by selected instances. So a selected instant might be saying, I know that the scientists have said this thing about global warming, but in this one report it says, and they give a selected incidence. That means that, confirmation bias, all that other researches, because it doesn't fit your belief, is now null and void.
Wow. So confirmation bias can be an effect of different circumstances where, the news you watch, the people you listen to, your safe space you want to stay in, and then it can also be used as a weapon to support your narrative you want to portray.
Yeah, you're going to disregard or downplay contrary evidence. Disregard, downplay. It's called reduce the proportion. I want to minimalize the proportion. Yeah, those are 87% of scientists believe them, but you know what? They're the fake scientists. They're not the real scientists. You know what? We have the real scientists on our team because we're smart. Remember, you're smart because most people didn't know that Lincoln was a Republican. It's like, well, yeah, didn't know that.
That's almost using a straw man in order to build a confirmation bias.
Can you possibly imagine that? That's exactly what the straw man is meant to do. Scare crows away. That's what a straw person does. Is here's this crow hanging in this cornfield, and it's to scare the crows away from the corn. Don't look at this corn growing. Let it grow. I just put a belief in here, and I got this straw man that's watching over this, and you better not check my facts. Meanwhile, the corn is rotting. It's like it's bad corn. So there's also this other thing with confirmation bias where they do an interpretation of ambiguous information, that like this information that's sort of like kind of true, but it's really not fully true. And that's what another thing that works in the favor of confirmation bias, to create the fallacy, and take these proof of selected incidences, and then it's going to still affirm my belief. It's going to reaffirm, and then that person is going to get caught up and rationally create a story to contradict the real fact. Let me go ahead and do it this way so you can actually see how really this works in the worst way ever. Here, watch this one. Oof. There are 32 football teams in the National Football League, 32 of them, and they're all in different cities. These different cities, that's their team. Many of these teams are not very good. They're not going to win over 3 or 5 games in a given year. They're still going to play, and their fans will come to the stadium and sit there in the hopes that their team will win. Even though the Patriots or the Rams or the Chiefs are coming into coming in.
Yeah.
So that's called the bias of the fan. The fan has a biased perspective. You're going to just get tired of winning. We're United States, we're going to be winning all the time. That's a fan narrative of you're on the winning team by voting for me. And in getting this thing to move forward, to create a fan, the first thing I need to do is, well, I don't know, give them a hat. Give them a hat with a slogan on it. Make the slogan simple, easy. Make the slogan that the other side really can't argue with. Make America great again.
Yeah, because then if they criticize that, they're like, well, you don't want to make it great?
You don't want to make America great again?
Yeah.
It's like, we've got some problems here. All right. So we want this philosophy, this politic, this religious slant to go in the direction, even though it has a bunch of flaws to it. My religion is better than your religion. Why? Because my dad was in this religion. My mom was in this religion. Well, did your mom or dad question some of the primary beliefs in this religion? Did they test it out? No.
Probably not, right?
No, because what is it like, Tom, you're going to laugh as soon as I say this one. What would it be like if you're trying to meet your need for connection and family and peace and harmony during the holidays, during a celebration, and you're the person who said, I'm not doing that religion anymore. I'm not praying the way you're praying anymore. I'm not believing the way you're believing. Don't you think that would be a hard, difficult thing to do?
It'd be very hard to do.
Very hard to do.
Go against the grain, disrupt the harmony, and the peace. And no, people tend not to do that despite their own beliefs or their own, in that situation, despite their own curiosities. Actually, that's a word that earlier I was thinking about when it comes to confirmation bias and people opening up their mind. I think that the thing we talked about, it being uncomfortable, it being hard to do, people resist change, is one aspect. I think another one is a lot of people lack curiosity.
Boy, I really appreciate this sentence called lack curiosity, because this is going to open us up to why bias can be so easily hijacked. Tom, your creative mind does not work well under pressure or stress. It just doesn't. Our creativity doesn't. When we're under pressure or stress, what winds up happening is that we go into safekeeping mode. We do not go into creative mode or open mind thinking. So, as most Americans have been forced into paycheck over paycheck over paycheck, waiting to make the finish line with no hope of getting out of that cycle of things, they can't be creative. They can't be objective. They can't really fully engage it because they are concentrated on safety. They are not concentrated on truth, reality, best case scenario. They can't. Why? They can't think that way. I don't have time for that. I have time to plop on the couch at the end of the day. I have time to go to the movies with my kids just to get some form of connection with them. I can maybe do something on the weekend, but guess what? They're stuck with their layers of connection with their technology and things like that too, with their friends online. My friends are playing a game online. I'm not getting off this thing. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to meet the need for connection with you when I can meet the need for connection with them. So there's the pressure. And what is the pressure? The pressure is when financial concerns are facing the individual, my bias, my safekeeping bias can't be questioned. I don't have time to question it, which creates all kinds of shenanigans showing up. Because if a person doesn't have time to push back, they don't have time to rally. They don't have time to speak up. They don't have time to build the facts and the evidence on their side. Why is it taking so long for the impeachment stuff to get going? Is that the populace doesn't have time to really see the depth and the scope that this impeachment is 10 times worse than what Nixon did. 10 times worse than what he did. 10 times.
But nobody's talking about it. Nobody's illuminating. Yep. Nobody's shining light on this. And people don't believe that yet.
Once you generalize something, which they've done, and once you pick up the generalization narrative is, watch, I'll do it right now. There have been 10 things in the Mueller reports that are items of obstruction. 10 things. Tom, name one of them. See what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can think of one, but I don't know if it's the worst one.
Go ahead. Tell me which one you're thinking of.
When he ordered the White House counsel to go and fire the Attorney General. Or fire Mueller. I'm sorry, fire Mueller.
Fire Mueller. Good. That's a good one. Right. So there's one of them. He ordered it. He ordered the Attorney General. The Attorney General goes like, "That's crazy. You just can't. This is not a business. This is like we have laws around this thing. You can't you can't do that."
Right.
And so what they wound up doing is ignoring. Now, why did they, if they didn't ignore him and they did what he said, he would be out by now.
Sure. Yeah. If they had followed through on it, for sure.
And they're still protecting him because they are refusing to come to talk about it. They're protecting him, which is keeping the bias in place. There's nothing to talk about here.
Yeah.
Look the other way.
There's no there there. Yeah.
There's no there.
Yeah.
So if a piece of work like the Mueller report, no matter how well it's written or how loose it's written, the viewpoint keeps getting skewed because when it lands on something, and when Mueller speaks and says, hey, there wasn't evidence in here that would have said he was innocent. I just can't say he was guilty because this is not a criminal piece. This is a political, we have other evidence to deal with this. This needs to be handled in a different way. Now he can't put his thumb on the scale. Here's what that would have sounded like. The mechanism in the criminal justice system is not a fit for this. It would be better served if the impeachment process started. He can't put his thumb on that scale, even though that's what he laid out, encouraged, implied, put the breadcrumbs. Here's where to look. Here's who to interview.
Right.
Here's what they said to me. You got to get them to say it openly. It's not going to work if I just write it down and tell you what it is. It doesn't allow the president to defend or build context around it. So he's protecting the president too. But he's more protecting the integrity of the system than he is the president.
I think that I get that impression. Maybe I have to say that's my belief. Bill, time out. I unfortunately I can't go long today. I know we're not done.
You know what? We cannot go long today either. I have another one coming up in a minute.
Okay.
And I didn't want to get into that. So let's do a wrap up here.
All right.
And then we'll get off in 1 minute. Okay.
Okay. So, Bill, where do we go from confirmation bias now? What's the next path in our journey here?
Well, I think the next path in our journey is going to be, what is the clear ideology that we'd like to move forward with? What is the identity and the values of those identities to move forward with? And then build a healthy narrative about what those identities are. And when you get pushback from the other side, the candidate that does that best is going to be able to lay the case why they can be the best leader to impart that identity. And that's where we're going to go next. We've got to get the ideology and the identity of America the way we'd like to see it, collectively, more than marginally, because right now it's being defined marginally. And that's what a confirmation bias does, is defined an identity or ideology in a very narrow way. And it keeps getting narrower every day. It gets narrower. He fires another person. He doesn't rehire anybody. The ideology, it keeps getting narrower on his ideology.
Right.
And that's not good.
Okay. Awesome.
More to come, Tom.
Thank you so much. That was a great one.
That's a good one. Thanks a million. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.